Once upon a time, back in the 1800s to be exact, there lived three storytellers by the names of Wilhelm and Jacob Grimm, also known as the Brothers Grimm, and Hans Christian Andersen. The wonderful and imaginative stories that they crafted nearly 200 years ago continue to inspire and excite our imagination even in the 21st century. But despite all this, there are not many people who know their names, even though their stories are the basis for many popular Disney movies that we all know and love. However, their versions are a little more grim than some of our modern adaptations. That's why I'm here today, to tell you the real story behind two popular Disney movies that originated with these expert storytellers, The Princess and the Frog and The Little Mermaid. I've chosen these two stories because there are huge differences between the original stories and our modern adaptations. With both of these stories, I'll sum up the Disney versions, and then I'll tell you what really happened. I'll start with The Princess and the Frog, which is Disney's version of The Frog Prince by the Brothers Grimm. In this story, Prince Naveen here gets himself turned into a frog by the Voodoo Man, and of course, the only way to break the spell is a kiss from a princess. That's where Tiana comes into play. Prince Naveen convinces Tiana to kiss him, hoping it'll break the spell, but to no avail. She turns into a frog too. As it turns out, she's a waitress, not a princess, so she can't break the spell. They then go off on a daring adventure through the bayous of Louisiana, trying to find someone to change them back. But nothing happens. In the end, they fall in love and get married, even though they're still frogs. But when they kiss, they magically turn back into humans, because now Tiana's a princess and she can break the spell. It's a wonderful story of love overcoming all obstacles and of accepting people, warts and all. However, the original story doesn't exactly leave you with those nice warm fuzzies inside. The original version, by the Brothers Grimm, starts with a nameless princess who spends her days playing with a little golden ball next to the well in her courtyard, which is just a recipe for disaster. As you might expect, one day she drops the golden ball down the well and cries loudly for the loss of it. A little frog, the Frog Prince, hears her crying and comes to see what happened. The frog promises to get the golden ball for her if, in return, she'll agree to be his constant companion day and night. The princess agrees, thinking that the frog would never actually be able to leave the well. So, when the frog comes back with a little golden ball, the princess takes it and runs inside. Later that day, the king found out what happened and made the little princess hold up her end of the deal, and the princess grudgingly agreed. She let the little frog share her food and took it with her everywhere, but by the end of the day, she got so frustrated with the little frog that she picked him up in her hand and threw him against the wall as hard as she could, which somehow broke the spell. No kiss involved. I'm not really sure where that part came into the story, but in the end, they lived happily ever after. The next story I'd like to tell you about is The Little Mermaid. In this story, Ariel here trades her voice and her fins in order to be human for 3 days, and in those 3 days, she has to win the heart of Prince Eric. Well, things were going so well when Ursula here intervened, and Ariel ran out of time. The prince discovered what happened, so he and Ariel work together to defeat the evil sea witch, and everything goes back to normal, including Ariel's back to being a little mermaid. Ariel's father, King Trident here, sees how unhappy Ariel is, so he changes her back into a human so she can be with the one that she loves. They get married, and, of course, live happily ever after. Unfortunately, the original story doesn't end so happily. The original version, by Hans Christian Andersen, starts with a nameless princess, and she gives her voice and her fins in order to be human. Her time on Earth isn't limited, but should the prince ever decide to marry anybody else, she'll turn into sea foam as soon as the sun rises on the next day. Also, the little princess has the grace of angels, but it feels like knives are piercing her feet whenever she walks or dances. In the end, the prince does decide to marry somebody else, and then the princess has a choice. She can either let the prince be, let him be happy, or she could kill him and go back to being a little mermaid. Well, the Little Mermaid decides that she loves him far too much to kill him, and she can't imagine living in a world where he doesn't exist. So, she goes out to the front of the boat where the wedding took place, watches her very last sunrise, jumps into the ocean, and turns into sea foam. I'm not here to tell you which version is better, or to try and explain why the versions are so different. My job here today was to tell you the real stories behind The Princess and the Frog and The Little Mermaid. You are now some of the few who know both sides of these stories, and I hope you'll treasure that knowledge. The original versions are darker, and some of them even bring tears to your eyes. But, after all, not all stories can end with happily ever after.